You know, I worry for them, really, when they come up this early. But it's nice that they're here. It shows you that spring really is on its way. And there's something about these dwarf narcissi. They're perfectly proportioned for a small garden, and they're perfectly coloured too. On this week's programme, Stephen Lacey moves further along the Californian coast to the garden of Carol Valentine, an octogenarian with an unlikely passion for modern garden design. They keep saying that gardening is now, well, fashionable, so I'll be finding out what horticultural happenings we can expect for the next millennium. While back in the 20th century, Gay Search visits a hot spot of the West Midlands behind the semi of Paul Bridgens. And it's National Rose Week. Not that they're in flower, but it's a great time to plant. You may have noticed recently that roses have taken a bit of a dive in popularity, which I reckon is a bit unfair. And the rose growers too are doing their bit to market them a bit more strongly. But whatever you're planting, you need to give your roses a bit of sustenance, something to sink their teeth into, or their roots into. This is just well-rotted manure from a local stables. With a container-grown rose, all you need to do is water it in, tap it out of its container and sit it in the hole, then fill around it and firm it. But with a bare root rose like this, which has got an awful lot of root, you don't need all this and you can get rid of quite a lot of it. These big fat roots are useless to it. It's the fine feeding roots which are going to eventually form new anchorage roots. And you've chopped them all off, lower it into the hole. Now there's a difference of opinion as to how deep roses should be planted. Some say high, some say low. I like to think that that graft union is just fractionally below the surface of the soil for extra stability and so that it can encourage rooting from the base of these stems. I'm going to mix a bit more of this well-rotted farmyard manure with the soil I removed and then fork it back in around the roots there and then firm it with me welly. You don't want to leave any air pockets around a plant, otherwise the hole can fill up with water and it can drown. When you've finished, tidy the soil up with your fork and then add more manure to act as a moisture-retaining mulch on the surface. When it comes to pruning, you can see how short the hybrid teas and floribundas have been cut when they're new, but shrub roses like this don't need to be cut back. I think this one will do quite fine. I know it's not very glamorous, but it will be in the summer. Mind you, Stephen Lacey's got glamour right now. He's in Santa Barbara, California, meeting an octogenarian gardener called Carol Valentine. And if you think you're a bit set in your ways and a bit too old for modern ideas, just look at hers.
Moving south down California, the climate starts to change. Here in Santa Barbara, we're starting to tap into some real glamour. Warmth, year-round sun, and some stylish modern living. The garden I'm visiting today is considered one of the gems of the California style. I've been itching to come here ever since seeing photographs. A half-acre plot that's been designed for Carol Valentine by one of America's leading garden designers, Isobel Green. Seeing how the contemporary feel is carried outdoors is for me one of the most exciting aspects of coming to America. At home, the appetite's growing for modern art and design, but of course here it's widespread amongst older as well as younger people.
This is really the best way to see the view. You look down on the garden from here, but I'm also delighted that you're looking at the island today. You don't always see that. But of course, I always like people to come this way to look at the garden first because you look down to see it. You can visualize that you see this from the air and you see farmland or maybe rice paddies or whatnot. And of course, that shale there represents water. Because when this garden went in, we were in the midst of a drought and we had very little water. This half of the garden is all drought tolerant. That hasn't changed much. You can take one of the little places over there and put something in it that you want because you think it's an attractive plant. Well, it turns out to be totally inappropriate. You can pull it out. It hasn't ruined anything in the garden.
Is it quite a serious job to terrace this?
Oh, it was, because it is very steep. But Isobel was in right from the beginning, so she knew what she was in for.
Each garden absolutely reflects the taste of the owner and the situation, the spot, and the climate.
It's got a very minimalist look.
That was partly the wish of my client, and of course it's a very small space. It has to be thought through carefully, and all the elements chosen with care. And of course there was very little water. The trees were chosen to fit into this very narrow space, which also is quite tall. And so the Maytin weeps down, and it was an exceptionally narrow one I chose. And the Hymenosperum grows very slender, and the eucalyptus too grows very slender. And they've, through the years, through these 18 years, they've been pruned to hold this shape. I do like to use stems singly and in small groups so that you see through them and you get a more, I guess it's a romantic sense of distance through them. And it's in a way, it's like a museum placement. Certain objects to be seen singly, alone, for what they're good for. We wanted to save some of her precious water and give her a real sense of lushness by the front door. So therefore, the pond and the slate was to form the perimeter. And then there were all the little shards left over from creating the pond. That was her idea, to save them and bank them up against the edges, and to plant the little succulents in between, just as you'd have on a screed slope high in the mountains.
A lot of the planting here is permanent, isn't it?
I would say 60 or 70% is permanent, and that was decided on by Carol and myself, and it creates the larger pattern. But within that, she changes things all the time, and it's a wonderful surprise to come here and find a strip of something that's orange one day, and then the next month it's green, or it's turned to cabbages or something like that. She has a lot of fun. The design can incorporate all kinds of changes and still be basically what it is.
And there are lots of echeverias around, and they're used wonderfully in the pots on the terrace too. Aren't they wonderful little gardens?
Yes, she gets wonderful new things from people, cuttings and things, and she puts them together with a slate and makes arrangements.
I mean, that's such a good idea for us, you know, where they're not hardy.
Yes,
you know,
that's
to treat
true.
them like that.
You can take them indoors.
And the other thing I loved is the little sempervivum gardens up the steps.
Yes.
Aren't they super?
Well, you have to fill the cracks with something, and actually that's the way they would occur in nature.
When Isobel made the first sketch of it, and it came out like this, and I said to her, "Oh, that's nice." And she said, "Is that all you're going to say?" But I said, "It's exactly the way I envisioned it."
And what about all the fruit and vegetables? Is that something you wanted to have in the garden?
I don't want to have things to eat. Having my lettuce, enjoying it and eating it too.
Not to speak of your artichokes and your figs and your
Raspberries
persimmon,
over there.
raspberries, apples. All these edibles are very ornamental.
And it must have been fascinating, though, seeing it all evolve over the 18 years. The exchange of ideas has continued, hasn't it, all that
It
time?
has continued, yes.
And, you know, really, that's the wonderful thing about designing gardens. To stay with the garden, to keep coming back, and to see that it actually has become more than you envisioned. It's better.
Over this plank bridge, supported again on posts, to the deck area that we started last week by laying these joists, and now just about 3/4 of the way across with planking it with this 4x1 pressure treated timber, which I'm using for the deck itself, already cut to size, and I want to fix it to the joists with galvanised nails. The posts that we put in last week have been cut off at a height of about 8 feet and fastened together with 4x2-inch joists, and from those joists run up 3x2-inch rafters to a central point, and it's to these rafters that I'm fastening feather-edged pressure-treated timber overlapping. It should make it reasonably weatherproof. Once I've finished this section of roof, all I need to do is paint the whole thing with a timber preservative and then fix a finial on the top to finish it off. I like gazebos. I know I get it in the neck for using them quite a lot, but there we are. It's fashionable, I think. And you know, they're even predicting now what the fashions in gardening are going to be into the 21st century. Lee Edelcourt is a powerful and influential lifestyle forecaster to worldwide industries. So what does she have to say about gardening?
Gardening is a mega trend at this point in the world. I have never seen anything like it in my life compared to any other trend. Probably this is because we need to hang on to nature in this end of the century, where the world is becoming more and more virtual and more technological. The aim of our trend prediction is the industry of horticulture, because they need some guidance, I believe, because it's such a tremendous growing industry. They are becoming as big as fashion or design, and in fact there's no direction at all.
Nice ideas, but will the gardening world pay attention?
Trends are important in horticulture because we're going around in circles. We're always taking an old idea, making it better, improving it for our own space, and developing it, and then constantly going back, looking at old ideas, and so we're just going round and round, getting a little bit better each time, rather than come out with punchy new ideas all the time.
I believe that there's going to be a trend for urban gardens, mixing cactuses and stone and cement, so it's much more like a minimalist thing. I believe we will go back to planting trees, especially fruit trees and apple trees. I see more wildflowers or small versions, almost like wild versions of cultivated flowers. We try to pick out in the plant world plants who do have a metal edge. And then when you combine them with matte metal pots or recipients, suddenly that whole thing becomes like a metal world. There's going to be a trend towards blue in the garden, botanical blue. It's very purplish blues, and strangely enough, as always, those blues are also becoming important in interior and fashion.
And now it's time for garden cuttings.
With a bit of imagination, it's possible to plant up just about anything. And for a hanging basket with a difference, I'm going to plant a bird cage. If you hunt around a bit, there are actually quite a few bird cages available, and they range from this beautiful old bird cage, which has bars that are rather close together, so you're going to find you'll need to remove some of them to get access in there to actually plant. And the base is solid, so make sure you do punch some holes in it for drainage. But I'm going to use this beautiful little ornamental bird cage. Now the whole lid section lifts off, so I can get in there without any problems at all. The first thing to do is to pack the base of this little cage with moss, and this proprietary liner, polythene backed, with little holes in it for drainage. Then the compost, and this is specially blended compost for hanging baskets, so it's very lightweight and it's got water retaining granules as well. And then we're ready to plant the first plant. And that's this little training ivy, little hedera helix. And I'm going to plant that pretty much on its side and just sort of ease some of these tendrils out. I'm going to put in this sweet little alpine strawberry. It may not look like much at the moment, but soon it's going to flower, and then in the autumn we'll have lovely tiny little red fruits. Now the idea is that if the birds couldn't get out of the bird cage, presumably they won't be able to get in and pinch all the fruit, so we shall see. Now next, just for some spring colour, I'm going to use this little narcissus. This is Narcissus Jumbly. It's very similar to Tete-a-Tete, but it has a slightly more lemony colour, which I think is very fresh and pretty. So that goes in the back here. That's it, water it well in, hang it up, and then enjoy watching your little flowers fluttering like birds in the breeze.
If you're growing fuchsias on your windowsill or in your greenhouse, they're probably looking a bit tired now, like mine. Don't worry, take shoot tip cuttings from them. Just cut off a shoot tip with your knife. Cut the lower leaves off it. You can pinch them off actually, they're very tender. And then make a cut just underneath that leaf joint, but that's your fuchsia cutting. You can fit 3 of these around the edge of a 3.5-inch plastic flower pot filled with soilless multi-purpose compost that's suitable for seed and cuttings. Water them in and then stick them in a propagator. Other jobs to be getting on with this week. Thin out the seedlings of hardy annuals sown last autumn to promote strong and bushy growth. Clear out any dead leaves or debris from ponds. Pot up overwintering cannas to start them into growth. And I know it's boring, but clean your tools and rub down the blades with oil. Prune Bodleias, Salix, Cornus and Caryopteris. And put sharp grit around hostas just as they're emerging to deter slugs. As we always say on Gardeners World, small is beautiful. We're always keen to feature small gardens. Gay Search has found an absolute cracker, a 40-foot square tropical paradise in the West Midlands, behind the house of Paul Bridgens.
It's always a real treat to come across an attractively planted front garden. And what I particularly like here is the way that one garden has been allowed to flow naturally into the neighbours. Just looking at this, you know that whoever lives here is a very keen gardener. But even so, nothing that you see out the front quite prepares you for what you're going to find out the back. Well, this is not the sort of garden you'd actually expect to find in the West Midlands, so how did it all come about?
When we moved into the house 10 years ago, there was a very large pond in the middle of the garden, and we've 2 small children, and it would have been dangerous to have left the pond, and I wanted to do something with it that would be a little bit different. So I first of all broke up the wall which was across the garden, and then built a wall which is at 45 degrees to the house. The reason being that the garden is more or less square, and the longest vista is on the diagonal. I thought the best thing to do was to reuse the old materials. So I used the granite sets to run as ribbons between the slabs, and I put gravel between the sets because it was cheap, and then planted out with herbaceous perennials to give instant impact. And then in a local garden there was a Trachycarpus fortunei, Chusan palm. And I thought, well, if they can grow them, I can grow them. And gradually I began to think, well, perhaps I could stretch the boundaries of hardiness and just try. 2 years ago I took a deep breath and I planted a Phoenix canariensis, which is supposed to be fairly tender, but for 2 years they've lived through the winter. I would think probably people are more cautious than they need be.
As well as the more usual suspects, you have some very unusual plants, things I haven't seen before. What's that one behind you?
That's a Dazzlerian. It will grow outside, providing you've got very, very well-drained soil. And in fact, the Dazzlerian is grown in the pot in a third grit. The top third is just pure grit, and then a gritty compost below it. That does actually go in the winter. Well, some of them go in a little passageway at the side of the house, and the rest go in the sitting room. I've got a fairly large Agave Americana, and that goes into the house, but many of the others stay out.
One of the things I really like about your garden is the way you've mixed the more tender exotics with other hardy plants. What sort of criteria do you use for choosing those plants?
The architectural plants, of course, have presence all year round, but some of the herbaceous perennials will give interest for a short period of time, and the fact that they're exotic doesn't necessarily make them garden worthy. But on the other hand, some of the things which are not particularly exotic are attractive to look at, or maybe even suggest an exoticism about them. For example, Crocosmia, because of the fiery flame flowers, it looks exotic. So it's a case of judging whether something is worthwhile in a garden. I wanted a water feature, one of the reasons being that water tends to mask noise, and in a small garden it's difficult to find space for a water feature. So I decided I would like a wall mask fountain. And to be honest, I felt that a lion's head or the Green Man were a bit overdone. So I thought something more quirky. So I had a pig.
Obviously the garden's very well established now, so impulse buyers presumably have to go into a space where something already is. How frustrating do you find that? Wouldn't you like twice the space?
The way I rationalise it is sometimes I hope things will die so that I can say, oh good, there's a space to put something else. So that's the way I try and deal with impulse buys.
What's the best bit about the garden for you? Is it sitting in it, or thinking about it, or doing it?
The relaxation in gardening is actually gardening. I can't sit for long periods in the garden because I find that I think, oh, those hosta leaves just need rearranging, and so I don't sit for very long in it. But it gives me pleasure, and if it gives other people pleasure, then I quite like that.
Ah, there's a man after my own heart. There's nothing nicer on a March day than sitting in your potting shed, throwing another stick on your pot-bellied stove, and then getting up and sowing the seeds of a few bedding plants. The seeds come in all shapes and sizes, from gigantic nasturtiums, which you can poke down into the compost with your finger to a depth of about 1 inch and space them about 2 inches apart. These are African marigolds, which when they've been sown do need a covering of compost. Then you get petunias and antirrhinums, which are really very fine. They still need the finest dusting of compost, but when you get to begonia seed, which is like dust and if you sneeze it's gone, don't cover it at all. These are rudbeckias, and these do need the faintest covering. I always sow from my hand by tapping the side of it. Then you can see those seeds bounce on the compost and they're spaced fairly evenly. And as I say, just give them the merest hint of a covering. An old flower sieve that I got in a junk shop. That's all they need. Label them and then water them. If you do it with a can, you disturb the seeds with the rows. So instead, get a trough like this and just lower the tray in. Now, it'll float at the start, but as soon as it starts to absorb water, it will sink. And as soon as you see that the moisture's hit the surface, take it out of that bath. Here's one I prepared earlier, Delia, and give it a little plastic top like that, which preserves the moisture around it, keeps it nice and snug. And then it can sit on this, which is the most wonderful heated windowsill propagator. You plug it into the mains and it gives a heated base which gets those seeds through faster. And it only costs about £30. I think it's wonderful value. 7 little trays on it. This, of course, is cheaper still. The classic plastic seed tray with a transparent dome on it. Still fits on your windowsill, but no heated base. And on little tiny flower pots like these, you can get wonderful little bell jars which sit on the top. It's a darn sight cheaper, you know, raising your own bedding plants, and extremely fulfilling. Whatever the weather this weekend, enjoy your garden. Ta-da!
Charlie Dimmock admires the beautiful countryside surrounding the River Medway in her river walks at 11, after Matt James creates a wildlife meadow in Chelmsford next tonight in Eco Eden.